The way we find work is changing. Most of it is online and via networking. And the way in which employers hire people is starting to change too. Now, I don't know about this particular group of people, but most of my clients who come to me, one of their biggest frustrations is that they send in an application for a role and they never hear anything back, even though they think they've got perfect skills and experience. 90% of the time, the reason they don't hear back is because the actual recruitment process is managed by AI, artificial intelligence, and applicant tracking software. So because recruiters will receive now up to 600 or 700 applications for one job, the way in which they manage that is something called ATS. That's an applicant tracking system. Essentially, about 70 to 80% of all employers and recruiters use ATS. If your documents do not comply with ATS requirements, your resume will never be read by a human. And that's a horrible thought when you've probably pumped hours of time into actually prepping your resumes. So what you need to do ensure is that you understand how ATS works, and that's where career coaches and online resources come in, and make sure that your documents comply with ATS requirements. ATS very briefly basically functions a little bit like a Google search, if you like, in that when you run a Google search, Google itself runs an algorithm. That algorithm programs keywords that need to appear as a result of that search. Those keywords in context are what's found on the web pages, and that's what brings you your top 10 search results. So if I want to really simplify what ATS looks like, that's what it looks like. It looks like a Google search, but it is run, and the search terms are the position description or the job advertisement, and the inputs or the outcomes are your applications. So if you know anything about how websites operate, websites have to be optimized so that, for example, if you put in job search, Seek is going to be one of the ones that come up first, and then you're going to have LinkedIn. Then you might have a couple of recruiters. That's not because Seek is well known as one of the biggest job search providers. It's because they've optimized the content on their site accordingly. ATS works the same way. So you have to optimize the information you provide in your resume in order to be shortlisted for a human being to ever actually look at your application. If you want to know more about that, you need to come to the third of these workshops, where I will tell you exactly how to make sure that your resume is ATS compliant. So the other ways of employing that is changing is that the hiring process is going to start using AI even more heavily, and it's going to start doing background searches. Okay, that means that they're going to start looking at social media pages, using software again to review where you've been, what you've done, what you offer. And it develops a bit of a profile, which basically says this is the type of person that is applying for this role. So your online presence matters. That's why having a compelling LinkedIn profile that you actually use regularly and clean social media accounts is all important. Increasingly, employers will also value the way in which you showcase your expertise. So they'll consider things like blogs and other online content when reviewing your application. They're also a lot more likely to look favorably on things like volunteer work and community involvement. So consider this: you come as a full package to an employer. Employers are finally realizing that it's not just your employment experience that matters, but you have to convey that to them. If you don't tell them about the skills you've developed in another area, they don't know, they can't evaluate it. So you need to make sure you articulate that really clearly in your online presence, in your application documents. And that obviously comes down to the last point, which is about articulating career skills, how you work, your capability, and your potential. When you apply for a job, and it doesn't matter if we're talking about a job in the retail sector, in customer service, in aged care, as an apprentice carpenter, whatever you're looking to apply for, you have to not just say in your preview, when you document your experience, don't just tell them what you did. Don't say that you helped build 6 houses if you're applying for a carpentry role. Don't say that you worked at Bed Bath and Table for 5 years and did 12-hour shifts. They actually want to know how you worked, what you could do, and what you can do in the future. Especially if you've worked at Bed Bath and Table for 6 years, but you actually want to go and work for Maya in their customer service division in the corporate sector, or if you want to transfer your skills to a different role. If you're applying for exactly the same role, just a different role, then that's fine. You can say exactly what you've done. But unless you explain how you do your work and what you can do, then they don't know what value you bring to them as an employer, because they don't necessarily want you to just do what you did in your previous role and do it for them again. Their role is going to be slightly different. Their business is slightly different. Employers are recognizing that. It's now up to us as employees or potential employees to actually convey that information. That's really important because your likability is what's going to set you apart. When people employ, they're looking at three things in the recruitment process. Can you do what you say you can do? Can you do it, and can you do it for them? How do you do that work? So how do you go about actually doing that type of work? What's the process that you follow? No matter how simple you think it might be, it is relevant to an employer. And the third thing is, do we like you? Because ultimately they're hiring humans. And what sets you apart from another candidate isn't that you have one more year of experience. That might be part of it, or it might be that you have a particular certificate or a particular credential. But what really sets you apart is, do we like you? That's what they care about. You have to showcase that. And the how you work is the only way you can convey that in a written application. When you get into an interview, that's where it all takes off. That's where you really have to use those interpersonal skills and you have to start developing them. So if you feel interpersonal skills is an area where you need to develop better skills, then things like volunteering is a great way to start, or sign up for some short courses in interpersonal communication so that you understand what that interaction involves with different people, different communication styles, because you don't necessarily have to be a happy, bubbly person all the time in order to be likable. You just have to be relatable. They have to relate to the type of person you are and think, okay, they could do the job. That's all they need to know. Okay, let's talk more about this changing world of work. So employer trends and influences, this is what tells you what types of roles are available and where you can find them. So here's what's influencing things. You might not realize it, but Australia relies heavily on international talent and skills. And yes, that includes international students. Everything from bricklaying to accounting has been on the skilled migrants list. Plus, companies have consistently brought in new leadership from overseas. This is a trend in skilled and unskilled labour as well. Look at fruit picking and other seasonal jobs. Look at childcare, teaching. The pandemic has shifted our employment patterns, and this gives us an opportunity to shift our employment expectations. Basically, it gives us opportunities to snap up jobs that would have otherwise been filled from someone who's migrated or from someone who's come out on a short-term visa. We've got local students who are struggling to get work experience, and they, as I said previously, might be more open now to consider working in rural and remote locations, for example. Equally, we've now got employers who are far more likely to look at Australian job seekers with renewed appreciation. This is where that focus on capability, what you can do, and making sure you articulate that. That's why that's really important. We're already hearing from recruiters that there's been a much greater focus on internal career progression as well. Previously, the only way to move up a ladder, or at least a preconceived idea, and to be fair, this was true about 70% of the time, is that your best chance of getting a promotion, even if that's, say, from one department to another in Bunnings, or if it's from picker-packer in a warehouse to store person. One of the ways to gain promotions has actually been to move company. You're also most likely to get a pay rise that way. That hasn't changed, but that is shifting slowly. Employers are looking internally to say, how can I fill that requirement from the staff we've currently got? We've also got a change. We're enabling remote working and supporting that with new tools and technology to enable collaboration, which is key, is allowing employers to access a much larger talent pool. What does that mean? It means if you're here in Melbourne, there's a much stronger chance that you can apply for a role that's actually based up in Brisbane. We've also got, as I mentioned before, the rise of the gig economy. If you haven't heard of that, it's basically taking on short-term contract freelancing work, everything from being an Uber Eats driver to working on Fiverr, potentially, as I say, a graphic designer producing logos. That's all examples of the gig economy. What that means is that employees have developed a portfolio career and don't have a traditional linear history. The more people that do that actually influences how employers perceive those people. If we now have 30% of employees and candidates having some type of a portfolio career, employers have to look at that and say, there's some value in that. How do we find it? Because more and more people are doing it. Employers, as a result, and this is great for us as employees, are starting to focus more on fostering a people-first culture. So culture matters more. They know that because of this shrinking talent pool, if they want to keep good employees on, they have to foster a good organizational culture, a workplace people want to be part of. Because believe it or not, and I know everyone's had different experiences here, but employers mostly want people who are committed to working for them because they invest thousands of dollars in training and recruiting staff. And if staff don't feel valued or enjoy the culture of a workplace, they're far more likely to move on. So let's talk about moving on. Believe it or not, we're at one of our highest peaks in terms of the number of jobs that are advertised currently. This is a graph that I lifted from the ABS last week. And basically, if you can look at that, we've got the highest rate of employment in 2021, or as of Feb 21, than we had seen since, it only goes back to Feb 2013, but that was actually saying that we've seen since 2007. So that's a significant opportunity. We did see a nosedive, but that is climbing. Let's make the most of it. So we might at first think there's fewer jobs thanks to the pandemic. The data is telling us otherwise. So don't believe everything you hear in media. There's a lot of fear mongering going on. Don't buy into it if you're looking for a new job. There are actually significant opportunities for job seekers. There were an extra 88,700 people found jobs in February. For the first time in over 12 months, we had more than 13 million people in employment. Our unemployment rate has fallen to 5.8%. And as I said, jobs vacancies are at an all-time high. What does that mean? It means that we've also got an increase in choice. You can take control of your career as long as you know what you bring to an employer, you explain that, you articulate that, whatever it is, that unique combination of your skills, your experience, your attributes, what makes you a good employee. Get that down on paper and convey that to an employer. You also have to make a commitment to yourself. It's time for you to keep learning and growing. So this is also a good opportunity for that. We've got an increase in return to work programs. So if you are, that's another major trend. If you, and I know that a couple of people in this group were considering returning to work after a career break, there are opportunities in the larger corporates to access their return to work programs. If you join an organization's website like Flex Careers, and full disclosure, I'm a career coach for Flex. Flex works with some of Australia's leading employers to facilitate return to work programs where they actively look for and support people who've been on a career break. There is also a greater focus on genuine diversity and inclusion initiatives. So that means if you haven't been in the workplace because of neurodiversity, because you are less than able-bodied, if you feel that you have suffered discrimination in the past, now more than ever is a good time to start looking at new employers and see what's out there. Don't be, I suppose, biased by your previous experience because it is changing. It's a glacial shift. I will agree, employers are taking a very long time to come to the table, but it's happening. And now's a great time to take advantage of that. However, consider that employees and employers are becoming more discerning, so they're being pickier. Competition for roles with those leading employers, the ones with great culture, the ones who've got good programs in place, it's increasing. So it's really important, and I'll keep harping on about this because it's the most important thing you can do as a job seeker. You've got to learn to articulate your value proposition. So please come to the next 2 sessions. That's what I will cover in depth. You also have to start keeping a career journal to capture your achievements. Now, your achievements aren't just what you do. If, for example, you run a family daycare, you might think that's it. Well, I look after 4 to 7 kids every day. That's it. There's a lot more to it than that. If you run a family daycare, you are managing OHS requirements. You are managing the logistics and the communication. You are managing the children under your care. You're setting up engaging learning activities. You are providing care at a fundamental basis in a safe environment. You're building connections and relationships with the parents, etc. It's not just what you do that matters. Again, it's how you did it and what the outcomes were. It's important to note that as the employment process and type of work changes, there's implications for your career. Whether you're an electrician or a boilermaker, a marketing manager or a supply chain coordinator, an OHS officer or a teacher, career paths are no longer set in stone. I know based on the emails that were sent out, that works for some of the people who are here on this workshop. It's a benefit and a disadvantage because it means you have to take control of your career opportunities. You can't go to an employment services officer or a recruiter and expect them to identify the opportunities for you. But you can know that the opportunities are out there. And if you learn about them, you can take advantage of them. Okay. Emerging jobs. This is what some of you are here to find out. Where are the jobs? The new jobs, the ones that are coming up. Obviously, there is a tech focus to them, but there's also a human focus. So we've got digital marketing, cybersecurity, healthcare. And by healthcare, I mean all aspects of healthcare, everything from personal care assistants in the aged care sector through to nurses. In fact, I think nurses are currently in the highest demand. And then there is still growth in the retail sector, believe it or not. We are now looking at, retail is looking at people who understand customer engagement, how to work with customers and how to move that experience online. When stores open, they're now looking for retail providers and customer care consultants who can have an impact quickly, because you can no longer rely on old ways of doing things. You can no longer rely on the fact that the store is going to be open next month. There's a much greater drive for how do we combine sales with customer care and customer experience and drive sales in a shorter, sharper time in the retail setting. There's a significant increase in social support and mental health. Okay, so there's social workers, disability support workers, case managers, mental health experts at every level. And I don't just mean psychologists here. There's mental health first aid in larger organizations where there's a focus on understanding that within the workplace, people need to be supported to have healthy mental health or to have mental health support. We've also got counsellors and mental health providers and support providers where you can move into that sector with a qualification that takes about a year to complete. Those qualifications, and we'll talk more about those next week, some of those are funded by government as well. So that's an important consideration if you're looking at a career change or enhancing your employment prospects, is that you can actually do that by taking up the qualification opportunities that are currently available. Then we've got manufacturing. Yes, we've seen factories shut down, but that's partly because the way in which we manufacture is changing. And it's important to note that even the National Skills Commissioner has noted that it's not all doom and gloom that manufacturing is changing operations. The ones that are shutting down are the ones that are not adapting. The ones that are adapting are manufacturers who are bringing on new technology and new ways of working, smarter, streamlined ways of working, so that it can increase their productivity. But they still need people to run them. Less people, potentially, yes. People with different skills, however, is important. And that's where your opportunities lie, is where those skills are, in actually managing the machinery, in programming, in supporting, in quality assurance. There's a huge rise in professional services, and that's everything from accounting to legal practice to administration to management consulting, coaching, mentoring. There's a significant rise in scientific and technical services, in information technology. Obviously, that's everything to do with software and AI and the way in which we communicate, the platforms that we use, and a huge increase in education and training options. And that's both online and in person. This is something from the National Skills Commission, and this is the emerging occupations broken down by skill group. I'm going to return to this if we have time, because I'm conscious that I'm chewing through minutes and I want to give you guys time to speak and ask questions. But these are the emerging areas. And very quickly, there's obviously that digital area. That digital area spurs from there, we get a spin-off of a different sector, which is data analytics. And that's not just digital. That's basically, can we take numbers and can we run them through systems, and can we come up with a theory, a forecast? We can work out what the numbers are telling us. And that's quite important. We need to measure performance effectively and closely track return on investment. And that's what data analytics allows us to do. Cybersecurity is something we talked about previously as well, and that's quite important too. It's a growing need because digital business risk is key. In healthcare, we've got patients in outpatient care centres and home healthcare agencies, and disease management expertise is required as well. We've got the emerging business practices, and that fits under that professional services that I mentioned. Regulatory affairs and compliance is also a huge growth area. And if you have any OHS expertise, it is an area you can transfer into, again, with some upskilling and certification. We've got sustainability, engineering, and trades. So construction obviously is booming at the moment, and that's not just a current skill set that's booming. This talks about where the emergence is occurring. So what's growing in that space. And then we've got basically refreshing standards. So we've got everything from there, which is fundraising and research assistance, and they don't cover it there, but that also includes audit and compliance areas. Okay, does anyone have any questions before I keep streaming along here? Nope, okay, good. Hopefully you're not falling asleep either. Current jobs that are in demand. Okay. If we look at the top 20 in demand jobs today, as listed on Seek, it tells us some interesting things. Right now, it's all about roles that require people skills. That is the trend. That's what's going to continue. Despite the rise of technology, human-centered skills is key. Basically, think about what we need to do that humans can't replace. Nursing and care, we've talked about warehousing. We've talked very briefly, but supply chain management is absolutely critical. As we now know, if our supply chains break down, the whole country stops turning. In fact, so too does the whole world. We've got automotive trades, administrative assistants, sales representatives, physiotherapy, OT and rehab, childcare. We still want chefs and cooks because despite the pandemic, we want to eat and we want to eat good quality food. And even though Japan has tried, machines cannot take the place of a decent cook. So there is actual growth in that space. We also hire a lot of migrant cooks, believe it or not, and we're not bringing any of them into the country at the moment. So there is space in that sector if it's an area you want to move into. We've also got developers and programmers. We've got the mining sector, laborers, road transport. There's a typo there, I apologize. As I spoke before about, those are the specific roles in mental health. We've got psychology, counselling and social work. Dentists are in great demand. We've got child welfare and youth support. Machinery operators are still in high demand, but the ones who've got good computer skills are the ones who are going to get the jobs. And operations in the mining sector, again, because we actually rely quite heavily on international talent for some of these roles, there is now an opportunity for Australians to take on these Australian jobs. And I think it's a remarkable opportunity we should all be making the most of. What are the skills you need to have? These are the top skills identified by researchers and management consulting firms, including PwC. They've also been identified by the World Economic Forum. Social skills or soft skills are the ones that are going to be in greatest demand. So here we're talking about collaboration, communication, flexibility, digital literacy, creativity, critical thinking, public speaking, emotional intelligence, problem solving, risk management, the ability to analyze information, just basically look at a situation and identify the inherent problems and make a decision. It's something that a machine cannot do just yet. And more importantly, we don't trust machines to do it. So if that's the case, this is where the jobs lie. These are where the opportunities lie, is those things that cannot be replaced. We've got negotiation, we've got mentoring, coaching. These are all things that people do for people. It is slightly different to the list that I just provided of those jobs that are available right now. So what I strongly urge everyone to do, no matter where you're at in your career, if you're in current employment, if you're applying for a new role, what you need to do is look at the current roles that are available and in high demand and go for those. But once you're in a role, don't just work, okay, even though you have to work. Focus on building your career currency, if you like. So look at the skills that are needed for future roles and start building skills and expertise within your current role. So, for example, if you want a role in the retail sector and you secure a role there next week, once you've been in that role for 3 months, when they bring someone junior on board, offer to mentor that person, offer to show them the ropes, offer to train them. You're developing skills in mentoring and coaching. If you secure a role as a care provider, look around the world of caring, because it's a huge space, and look where you might want to be in the future. Who's doing the type of work you really want to be doing? Look at the skills that those people have. Look at this quick mind map or brain dump, if you like, and say, okay, what are the skills they're showing? They're showing resilience. They're showing flexibility. They're showing that they can solve problems quickly. They're showing that they can work collaboratively with multiple people and stakeholders. Look for opportunities in your current work to develop those future skills. That is ultimately the most important thing that you can do. Okay. Moving on to credentials and qualifications. Now, we will talk more about this in next week's session. So again, I encourage you to come along to that because I didn't want to spend too much time on it. But I do want you to know this. If you're looking at pursuing a career promotion, progression, or change, securing new skills comes in two ways: developing experience and getting credentials. The beauty of it is that what we see as being valuable, or what employers see as being valuable in terms of credentials, is shifting. So there's a strong move to what we call micro credentials. Micro credentials are basically smaller, short courses, bite-sized pieces of information and subjects and topics and skills that you can learn in a 6 to 12 week period of time. Things that you can sign up for that don't require you to undertake a postgraduate qualification or a bachelor degree or a master's, etc. There are always going to be vocations where you need that. For example, psychology, a lot of the healthcare settings, legal services, accounting. However, even within those disciplines, micro-credentialing and professional development is really important. What you can do with micro-credentials is twofold. One is it allows you to build skills in a sustainable manner. Okay, it's a really huge undertaking to say, I want to move into psychology because I want to move into mental health because I'm really good with people and it's a growth area. But psychology is a 6-year career study path. However, counseling is something you can complete in 12 months. It's something that's in high demand. Okay, the salary is not quite the same, but then the investment in time and in paying a university is quite different as well. Micro-credentialing allows for you to become a counsellor in a year because it's recognizing that counselling is a function that sits under mental health and to an extent psychology, but it's one small part of it. And therefore you don't need to learn all of the rest of the discipline in order to be really good at counselling. Micro-credentials are really good if you need to upskill. If you're working in manufacturing and you don't have good digital literacy, it recognizes that technology is constantly changing over time. So there's really very little use in you engaging in a 1-year course or a 2-year course or a 3-year course to learn specific programming skills, to learn specific coding skills. A lot of those skills are skills based. Okay, so there's skills and there's knowledge. So you develop the skill and then you keep adding to the knowledge. So if you know how to code, coding in different languages is something you can do a micro-credential in when a particular employer wants you. So there's different languages in the world of programming. I think Python is one and JavaScript is another, for example. One employer will want expertise in one area, one employer will want expertise in another. What micro-credentialing allows you to do is to say, I want to move to this role. In 3 weeks, I can do a micro-credential or a short course or a certificate in that space, and I will therefore then have those skills, and those credentials are now being recognized by employers. The second part to that, and that comes under new tertiary options as well, is that universities are offering micro-credentials because they recognize that a tertiary program or a bachelor's degree or even a diploma often can't change the content fast enough to keep up with what employers need and fast enough to keep up with the skills that are in demand. But they can offer that as discrete subjects. And the new tertiary options that I speak about there are also relevant because you can now complete a postgraduate qualification in sections. You don't enroll like doing, and this applies in some of the graduate programs and undergrads as well with places like Charles Sturt University and JCU, is that you don't, JSU, sorry, you don't have to enroll in 4 subjects for a semester. Instead, what you do is you complete one subject at a time over a 6-week period. And then if you need to stop because your kids have got school holidays, you finish that one subject and you take a break. And then in the next 6-week cycle, you pick up the next subject. And so it's a lot more flexible if you want to change career paths or develop tertiary qualifications. There is new vocational education funding available, and we'll talk more about that next week. There's also a lot more online learning available, and that's worked both ways. We've got quality educators now providing online learning opportunities as a result of the pandemic and us all being locked down and having to work remotely. And we've also got a greater appreciation from employers that online learning actually conveys relevant information and it matters. So now you can do short courses online and they will be valid. And those can be found in lots of different other spaces. So where you can find those is by TAFEs, by vocational education providers. You can find them by specialist education providers as well. So those are registered training organisations. Make sure, however, that where you get your information from or you sign up for your short course is a valid provider. So let's go back to psychology and counselling for a minute. There's the Australian Institute of Psychology, I believe, AIP. They provide psychology courses, but there's also, and so do universities. Now, AIP is recognised by the industry body for psychologists. So because the industry body recognises them as a valid training provider, you can comfortably do a short course with them in counselling and know that it's going to be valid. If you do it from an RTO that isn't registered to the industry association, you've got less likelihood of knowing for sure that they're a valid provider. There's also other ways you can develop skills. And it's something that is starting to become more recognised by employers, depending on how you phrase it. But you can get a lot of information from blogs, from podcasts, and from YouTube channels. I worked with some very senior administration professionals last week who had developed high-level advanced skills in Excel, and they did that simply by following a particular YouTube channel. As long as you can show the outcome of that, and again, make sure, look at reviews, look at comments on those providers, and those channels do provide that now, and make sure that other people validate the content that you're about to consume. If they do, you've got a good chance of ensuring and knowing that that information is going to be relevant, it's high quality, and you'll actually learn something, because everything is it's a balancing act, right? You invest your time, even if it's free, you're investing your time. You don't want to waste your time in learning something that's not going to be valuable. Now, podcasts and blogs are also important because you have to take control of your own career. As you probably know, which is why you're here in this workshop, your employer's not going to do it for you. Your manager's not going to do it for you. You have to remain up to date with what's happening in your own career space, because this is what learning for life is all about. And learning for life, or lifelong learning, that is the other pinnacle or pillar, if you like, of work in the future. We're all going to have to continue to work and develop new skills, and we can't work on a factory line and wait for Holden to shut down. We can't work on a factory line and wait for CSL to stop producing a particular type of vaccine and move to a different technology. We have to be aware of what's happening in our own industry at both those spaces, both those skill levels. The only way to do that is to continue to develop and refine your skills and to learn new technical expertise as it evolves. That doesn't mean you have to sign up for every short course under the sun, but what it does mean is you have to know what's happening. Take an interest in your sector and your industry. If you're interested in retail, sign up with the Australian Retail Association. Follow them on LinkedIn. Learn about what's happening and what's new and what's emerging in that space. If you're an accountant, make sure that even if you're not a member of your industry body, which I think is ideal, but if you choose not to do that, at least sign up for the industry body's newsletters, their information, how they push it out, whether that's via blogs, whether it's via LinkedIn. A really simple way of knowing what's happening in your sector is to set up a Google alert. And to set up a Google alert, you literally Google alert. And Google will tell you how to put in keywords for things that interest you. if you are interested in the aged care sector, if you're interested in social work, if you're interested in retail or accounting or bricklaying, it doesn't matter what it is. The best way to find out more is to use the internet to your advantage. Use it, put those keywords into a Google alert, set it up to send out to you once a week, and then read that information. It'll pull things, what's happening in the news. It'll pull things from what's happening from company websites. Be aware of what's going on, whether you're looking for work now. If you're looking for work now, that data is going to be invaluable when you start interviewing, because you'll be able to throw that information in there. And what that will tell you, even if you're applying for a carpentry apprenticeship, what that will tell the person that you're interviewing with is that you are actually authentically interested and engaged in that space, even if you're not working in it at the time. And that's another really great way to facilitate a career change as well, is show your knowledge of a particular space, even if you don't have direct experience in that area. Then you're leveraging your transferable skills and you're leveraging your knowledge. And that has value. Everything that you know is important. But what's really important is that you make sure that you can convey that to an employer. They won't know that until you tell them. Okay. And then we have some resources for you. And this is a very brief overview. I'm happy to send out more if you like. But there are lots of great providers that lots of great services that the government provides. So some of the data and the information that I've given you today about emerging jobs and jobs that are in demand are from Jobs Victoria. And they're also from the My Future, which is the federal level career information service. Career development, career coaching is an emerging field, and it's gaining significant relevance this year. The government's finally seeing that beyond schools, people need support in developing career pathways. It's not enough to have job seeker, and it's not enough to send everyone off to max employment and say you've got to apply for 30 jobs. What you actually need to do is understand what employers want, where the jobs are, what the jobs are, and how to apply for them effectively. This is where you can find some of those resources. And I've also included a link to Brimbank's, your own local council's learning provisions. And of course, I strongly suggest that you sign up for the next 2 classes, because we now know what the jobs are and have a rough idea of where they are. That's only a very small part of the puzzle. There's a lot that you need to do now to actually secure work in those spaces. And that's it from me.